The Hawk's Dilemma, an audio novel by Mal Gray.
Chapter 1. The Hawk of the Ra. Dawn came late to the Ra in winter. It crept over the river in a thin grey wash, touching the frost-stiff reeds and the low canvas tents of the Cossack winter camp with a colourless light. The river itself moved in slow, dark coils beneath a skin of drifting ice, whispering like something alive and watchful. The camp stirred quietly. Men sharpened sabres with gloved hands, fed horses, muttered about rumours from upriver. Smoke from the night's fires hung low, refusing to rise. Even the dogs were subdued as if the cold had pressed their voices down into the earth. Heatman stood alone outside his timber-planked hut, wrapped in a wolf fur cloak that made him look carved from the same winter that surrounded him. Igor Papovich did not fidget, did not stamp his feet, did not betray discomfort. He simply watched the river as if it were a rival general. When he saw the rider approaching, he nodded once. "You're late, Hawk." The man known as the Hawk swung down from his horse, Kuzma, whose breath steamed in the air like smoke from a forge. He bowed his head in respect, though not deeply. Papovich did not demand groveling. He demanded competence. "Summoned at dawn, Hetman," the Hawk replied. "Dawn only just arrived." Papovich grunted, then reached inside his cloak and produced a sealed packet. The wax was fresh enough to gleam. "A message from Riverbend. A sealed one. And trouble follows it." The Hawk took the packet. It was heavier than a simple letter, dense, as if it held more than words. He turned it in his hand, noting the off-center seal, the faint smudge of blue pigment along the edge. Before he could ask, the hetman continued. "A Wilhelmshausen patrol crossed the river last night. Scouts say they were looking for someone, or something." His voice dropped. "I need you to ride." The Hawk's jaw tightened. "What kind of patrol?" "Not the usual border sweep. A dozen riders, well-equipped. Their officer carried a lantern hooded in blue cloth." The Hawk looked up sharply. Blue-hooded lanterns were not for illumination. They were for signals. Covert ones. Papovich stepped closer, lowering his voice until only the Hawk could hear. "Take the message to the Duke's man in Koln. Avoid the main roads. And Hawk, trust no one wearing a uniform." A horn sounded faintly from the riverbank. 3 short notes. Scouts returning. The hetman's expression hardened. "Go, before the river speaks louder." But the Hawk did not mount immediately. He crouched beside a frost-rimmed log, scraping a trace of the blue pigment from the parchment's edge. It clung to his fingers like powdered silk, too fine, too bright, too expensive for anything but Wilhelmshausen officer-grade pigment. Someone with access to Wilhelmshausen signals had handled this message after it left Riverbend. He rose, tucking the packet into his coat. "I'll need the scout's report." Papovich nodded once. "They're waiting at the river." The Hawk swung into the saddle and guided Kuzma down slope. The frost cracked under hoof as he descended toward the river's edge. Mist drifted low over the water, and from it emerged 3 Cossack scouts, Mikola the Short, Danilo, and young Oleg, whose horse looked as restless as he did. Mikola wasted no time. "We found tracks," he said. "Fresh, Wilhelmshausen patterned shoes, moving fast." Danilo spat into the frost. "And a dead man." The Hawk's eyes narrowed. "One of ours?" "Number." Mikola shook his head. "Well dressed, no weapon, throat cut clean, hands bound, and—" He hesitated. Blue pigment under his fingernails. The Hawk felt the cold deepen inside him. "And we were followed," Danilo added. "A single rider, never close enough to see, but always there." Oleg shifted nervously. "Whoever he is, he's not ordinary." The Hawk turned to the youngest scout. "Oleg, back to the hetman. Now." Oleg straightened, swallowed, and nodded. The Hawk gave him the message. "Tell him Wilhelmshausen officers are on the river. They've killed at least 1 courier. They're signaling across the water, and they're hunting someone carrying a sealed message." He tapped his coat. "Tell him they may already know it's with me. Oleg wheeled his horse and vanished into the mist. Mikola exhaled. Good. The headman will want the camp ready. The river fell silent. No birds, no dogs, no wind. Only the slow, dark pulse beneath the ice. Mikola pointed upriver. We'll guide you to the old willow ford. Chapter 2. The Crossing. The old willow loomed over the river like a sentinel from an older age, its branches trailing into the dark water as if testing its depth. Frost clung to every twig, turning the tree into a pale skeletal giant. Beneath it, the Ra whispered under its thin crust of ice, a sound like distant breathing. The hawk guided Kuzma forward, feeling the horse's muscles bunch beneath him. The scouts waited behind, silhouettes in the mist, watching with the quiet intensity of men who knew how easily the river could claim a rider. Mikola called softly, "Keep to the shadow, don't drift." The hawk nodded once. Then he nudged Kuzma toward the water. The first step broke the ice with a sharp crack. Kuzma snorted, ears flicking back, but the hawk steadied him with a hand on the neck. The second step found firmer ground beneath the surface, the hidden gravel bar that made the ford possible. The willow's branches brushed the hawk's shoulder as he passed beneath them. The world narrowed to the sound of Kuzma's hooves, the creak of leather, the cold bite of the air. The river rose to the horse's knees, then to its chest, dark water swirling around them. Halfway across, the hawk felt it. A shift in the air, a prickle along the spine. He turned his head. A lone rider stood on the far bank they had left behind, motionless, silent, watching. The mist curled around him, obscuring details, but the shape was unmistakable. A tall figure on a dark horse, cloak hanging still despite the breeze. No lantern, no colors, no insignia, just presence. Danilo hissed from the pool. "Don't look back." But the hawk did. He couldn't help it. The rider did not move, did not call out, did not raise a weapon. He simply watched. Kuzma stumbled on a submerged stone, jolting the hawk forward. He tore his gaze away and focused on the ford. The river deepened suddenly, a drop he had been warned about, and cold water surged up to Kuzma's belly. The horse fought for footing, hooves scraping against unseen rocks. "Easy," the hawk murmured. "Easy, boy." The willow's shadow guided him. A few more steps, a few more breaths. Then Kuzma surged upward, hooves finding the rising bank. Water streamed from his flanks as he climbed out of the river and onto the far shore. The hawk turned in the saddle. The lone rider was gone, not riding away, not fading into the mist. Gone, as if he had never been there at all. Mikola cupped his hands and called across the water. "Ride, hawk! We'll hold the ford." The hawk raised a hand in silent thanks, then turned Kuzma toward the forest trail that led deeper into the peninsula. The sealed packet pressed against his chest like a heartbeat. Whatever game had begun on the Ra, he was now in the middle of it, and someone, perhaps more than one someone, wanted to make sure he never reached Koln. Chapter 3. Pine Hollow. The forest closed around him like a fist. Tall black pines rose on either side of the narrow trail, their trunks straight as pikes, their branches heavy with frost. Snow clung to the needles in thick white clumps, muting every sound. Even Kuzma's hoofbeats seemed swallowed by the stillness, as if the forest itself were listening. The hawk kept the river at his back and angled northwest, following a path known only to Cossacks, smugglers, and the occasional desperate fugitive. The sealed packet pressed against his chest with every breath, a reminder of the unseen hands that had touched it, and the ones that now hunted it. He rode hard for nearly an hour before the trees began to thin. Smoke drifted through the branches, faint but unmistakable. A fiddle's distant notes floated on the cold air, wavering like a memory. Pine Hollow, not a village, not even a proper settlement. Just a scatter of timber huts, a half-ruined chapel, and a tavern that pretended not to exist on any map. But it was friendly to Cossacks, or at least friendly enough to those who paid their debts and kept their knives sheathed. Kuzma snorted as they entered the clearing. A few horses were tied to the rail outside the tavern, shaggy mountain ponies, a merchant's gelding, and one sleek black mare that did not belong in a place like this. The hawk noticed immediately. So did Kuzma. The tavern door creaked open, spilling warm light and the smell of stew into the cold. A broad-shouldered man stepped out, wiping his hands on a rag. His beard was thick, his eyes sharp. "Saints preserve us," he said, breaking into a grin. "If it isn't the hetman's hawk." The hawk dismounted, keeping one hand on Kuzma's reins. Boris, the tavern keeper, smuggler, informant, and occasional liar, gave a low whistle. "You're riding early, and with a look that says troubles chewing at your heels. Troubles on the river," the hawk said, "and maybe in your yard." Boris followed his gaze to the black mare. His grin faded. "Aye. That one arrived before dawn. Riders inside didn't give a name." He leaned closer, lowering his voice, and didn't take off his gloves. A small detail, a dangerous one. Men who kept their gloves on indoors were hiding something: scars, ink, rank, or identity. Boris jerked his chin toward the tavern door. "If you're looking for news, you'll find it. If you're looking for safety," he shrugged, "you won't." The hawk stepped toward the door. The fiddle inside fell silent. Voices hushed. Someone had noticed his arrival. He pushed the door open. Warmth washed over him, thick with smoke and the scent of stew. The room was dim, lit by a few guttering candles and the orange glow of the hearth. Hunters near the fire paused mid-sip. A merchant pretended to study his cards. Two old men muttered into their beards, and in the far corner, a solitary figure sat with his back to the wall, the rider. His cloak was travel-stained but finely cut. His hood cast a shadow over his face, but the firelight caught the pale glint of eyes watching the hawk with unsettling calm. A bowl of stew sat untouched before him. A tankard of ale remained full. He had not come to eat. He had not come to drink. He had come to wait. The hawk crossed the room with deliberate steps and sat opposite him without asking permission. The tavern held its breath. Up close, the details sharpened. Fine leather gloves, dark and supple. A faint scent of horse and cold iron. A pale scar running from the corner of the mouth to the ear. Eyes that measured rather than judged. The rider spoke first. "You ride early for a man with no destination." The hawk said nothing. The rider tilted his head, amused. "No need for caution. If I meant you harm, Hawk of the Ra, you would not have crossed the river." A flicker of cold tightened in the hawk's chest. He had been watched. "Names are cheap," the hawk said. "Truth is not." "Then let us trade truths." The rider leaned forward. "A Wilhelmshausen patrol crossed the river last night. They were not hunting smugglers." The hawk remained silent. They were hunting a courier. The rider's eyes flicked to the hawk's coat, to the place where the sealed packet rested. And they were not the only ones. The tavern seemed to shrink around them. Even the fire quieted. The hawk's voice was steady. "What do you want?" The rider folded his gloved hands. "To offer you a warning," he paused, "and a choice." The hawk waited. "You carry something that was never meant to reach Colm," the rider said softly. "Something sealed in haste, touched by more than one hand, and stained with pigment that does not belong to Riverbend." The hawk's pulse tightened. "There are 3 factions hunting that message," the rider continued. 2 will kill you for it. 1 will kill you after you deliver it." He leaned back, the hood shifting just enough to reveal the faintest outline of a smile. "And I am here to tell you which is which." The hawk met his pale eyes. "Then speak." The rider nodded once. He removed one glove. The Chapter 5, The Glove Removed. The rider's gloved hand hovered for a moment above the table, suspended in the warm, smoky air of the 3 nails. The tavern was silent. Even the fire seemed to dim, as if the room itself leaned closer. Then he drew the glove off. The leather whispered as it slid free, revealing a hand marked not by scars or burns, but by ink, faint, intricate lines that curled across the knuckles and disappeared beneath the sleeve. Not tattoos, not soldiers' marks. The hawk recognized it instantly. He had seen it only once before, on the wrist of a dying courier in Riverbend years ago. A man who whispered a single name before he bled out on a stone floor. Valcour. The rider watched the recognition flicker across the hawk's face. So, he murmured, you do know the hand that wrote these. The hawk kept his voice steady. I know the woman who commands them. A faint smile touched the rider's lips. Then we may speak plainly. He rested his bare hand on the table, letting the ink catch the firelight. The lines were delicate, almost beautiful. The mark of a trained emissary, one of the covert agents Countess Elise de Valcour had cultivated in her oak-paneled library, where she hosted secret councils and funded loyalist networks that crossed marshes and borders. The hawk exhaled slowly. You're one of hers. The rider inclined his head. I was, once. The past tense hung in the air like smoke. He continued, voice low. When Duke John plotted his return to Riverbend, Elise built a web of loyalists, artisans, clergy, emissaries, smugglers. I was part of that web. We carried messages across the frontier, through Lorraine, through the marshes, through the courts that still whispered the Graubach name. He tapped the inked lines on his skin. These marks were our bond, our oath. The hawk studied him. And now? The rider's expression hardened. Now the web is tearing. He leaned forward, lowering his voice until only the hawk could hear. The message you carry was meant for Colm. Elise wrote it, or dictated it, but it never reached the hands she intended. Someone intercepted it. Someone sealed it in haste. Someone stained it with Wilhelmshausen blue. The hawk felt the weight of the packet against his chest. Who? He asked. The rider's pale eyes flicked toward the tavern door, as if expecting shadows to move. There are 3 factions hunting that message, he said, but only one of them understands what it contains. He paused. And that faction is not Elise's. A chill crept up the hawk's spine. The rider continued. Elise's loyalists want the message delivered. Wilhelmshausen wants it destroyed, but the 3rd faction, the one that handled it last, wants it delivered to Colm for their own ends. The hawk frowned. Who are they? The rider's voice dropped to a whisper. Riverbend's own court. The words hit like a blow. The court of Grand Duke Douglas, Elise's stepson, was moving against her network, against the Graubach loyalists she had sustained for decades. The hawk felt the ground shift beneath him. The rider leaned back, shadows reclaiming his face. You are carrying a spark into a powder room, Hawk, and every faction believes they can shape the explosion. The hawk's hand drifted toward his coat. What's in the message? The rider shook his head. I don't know. I only know this. Elise trusted the wrong courier. He died. The message passed through hands it should never have touched, and now the river runs red with the consequences. He stood slowly, drawing his glove back on. You asked what I want, he said. I want you to understand the danger, and I want you to choose your path with open eyes. He stepped away from the table. But I will not tell you whom to trust. The hawk rose as well. Why warn me at all? The rider paused at the door, silhouetted against the cold light outside. Because once, he said softly, I swore an oath in Elise's library, and though the web has torn, the oath has not. He opened the door, and because the men hunting you are already in the forest. The door swung alone in the silence. The sealed packet heavy against his chest, the weight of Elise's unseen hand pressing on every breath. Outside, the wind shifted, and the hunt began. Chapter 6. Threads in the Dark. The storage room felt suddenly too small, its single oil lamp casting long, wavering shadows across the stacked crates. The Hulk stood still, absorbing Boris's words, feeling the weight of the sealed packet like a stone against his ribs. Elise de Valcourt. Her name alone carried the scent of oak-paneled libraries, whispered councils, and the quiet rustle of maps spread across polished tables. A woman whose poise masked a mind sharper than any blade, a patron of displaced clergy, artisans, and loyalist emissaries, a bridge between courts that pretended not to speak. And now, the architect of a network unraveling. Boris watched him with a grim patience. "You understand now why the gloved rider came," he said. "Why Wilhelmshausen crossed the river. Why Riverbend's court is stirring like a nest of hornets." The hawk nodded slowly. "Because Elise's web is tearing." Boris snorted. "Tearing?" "Hawk, it's coming apart at the seams." He lifted the lamp and gestured toward a crate marked with a faded sigil. A stylized oak leaf. "You see that? That crate came from the rain. Inside are wine bottles with false bottoms. Messages have traveled in them for years. But last month, the vintner vanished. His barrels arrived empty." He moved to another crate, this one stamped with a potter's mark. "Here, bowls from a workshop Elise funded. The glaze used to carry coded messages. But the last shipment was smashed before it crossed the border." He set the lamp down, his voice dropping. "And the midwife who carried letters in her apron hem, found drowned in the marshes." The hawk felt a cold knot tighten in his stomach. Boris continued. "Elise's network was built on trust, on people who believed in the Grauback cause, in Duke John's legacy, in her vision for Riverbend. But trust is fragile, and someone has been cutting the threads." He leaned closer. "Someone inside the network." The hawk's jaw tightened. "A traitor?" "Or a frightened man," Boris said. "Or a desperate one. Or someone who thinks Elise's time has passed." He paused. "Or someone who wants her power." The hawk looked down at his hands. "And the message I carry?" Boris exhaled. "It's the last intact thread. Whatever Elise wrote, whenever she intended, it survived the break. And that makes it dangerous." The hawk's mind raced. If Riverbend's court had intercepted the message, if Wilhelmshausen had handled it, if Elise's own emissaries were compromised, then the packet he carried was not just a courier's burden. It was a spark in a powder room. Boris watched him carefully. "You're thinking of turning back." "No," the hawk said. "I'm thinking of who benefits if I fail." Boris nodded. "Good. Because every faction believes they can shape the future of Riverbend. Wilhelmshausen wants a puppet. The court wants stability. Elise wants restoration. And the loyalists want justice." "And the gloved rider?" the hawk asked. Boris hesitated. "He wants the truth, and truth is the most dangerous thing of all." A knock sounded at the door, soft, deliberate. Boris stiffened. "We're out of time." The hawk reached for his coat, fingers brushing the sealed packet. "Whoever's out there," Boris whispered, "they're not here for ale." The knock came again, firmer this time. The hawk stepped toward the door, every instinct sharpening. Boris grabbed his arm. "Hawk, listen to me. Elise's network may be breaking, but not all her threads are cut. There are still allies out there. Still safe houses. Still people who owe her their lives." He swallowed. "And some who owe her their deaths." The hawk nodded once. The third knock echoed through the storage room. He opened the door and stepped into the next thread of Elise de Valcourt's web.
To be continued. Produced at Riverbend Studios, Queensland, Australia, January 2026.